All right, CNT120 Chap4. We're on the section on TCP, Transmission Control Protocol. Transmission Control Protocol is working at the transport layer, and its job is to provide reliable data delivery. So think about the things that we would be sending across networks that would need to be a reliable delivery. Things like emails, things like web pages, because a partial email is not very good, a partial web page is not very good. So there are certain protocols that are going to use TCP at the transport layer and other ones that would not. Here's a graphic that gives you the idea of, here are some protocols that operate at the upper layers that would need the reliable transfer of data that TCP provides. And if you look at these are a lot of file transferring and or web page or email transferring protocols. That's what you're going to see. Now, this is not something you can choose. This is something that happens by default. It happens by default with the TCP/IP protocol stack. We'll look at later, there's some protocols that use UDP, again by default. We'll look at that later though. So here's a couple protocols giving an idea that these would be the ones that need the reliable data delivery. So to do that, there's three key characteristics that TCP uses for reliable delivery. One is it's connection oriented, meaning before any data gets sent, TCP kicks in and my computer and like the server, for example, communicate with each other, and we kind of get everything organized before we start shipping data. We basically organize and make sure we're both on the same page before we start shipping any data back and forth. That way, hopefully, if something goes missing, we can account for it and say, I need this piece that's missing. Which brings us to the next part. Sequencing and checksums. Yes. Anything we're sending now is going to get numbered, if you will. Kind of think about boxing up your house. You know, if you box up your kitchen, you're probably going to have a handful of boxes. So you might label those boxes kitchen 1 of 5, kitchen 2 of 5, kitchen 3 of 5, kitchen 4 of 5. And now when you get to your new house and set all the boxes in there and you see all 5 boxes, you're like, awesome. If you see 4, you're like, hey, can you check the truck? There might still be another box for the kitchen in there. And that is a way to keep track of everything. Well, with TCP, the same thing is going to happen. Everything's going to get numbered, and as it's sent, there's going to be, double checks. It's like, did you get it? Yes, I did. Did you get it? No, I did not. Resend, and it'll resend. That's your sequencing. Last but not least here is flow control. Both sides of this data sending and receiving can increase the amount of data they send per time or decrease if they start getting busy. If they start getting busy, you're like, hey, can we send a little bit less per time so I can process it? And that is a flow control. They'll call that, we'll look at that and we'll see that as a sliding window. All of those are things that TCP are going to use that are going to help ensure reliable delivery of data. They talk about the segment format. Remember that our upper layer data has a TCP header added, and now this whole thing is your TCP segment. So think about, let me scroll back here, as we were talking data encapsulation. Let me go back here to layer 4. Here we go, layer 4. All this upper layer data, HTTP, is now going to have a TCP header. So this thing right now is your TCP segment. That's what they mean by that. So if I take a look at the TCP segment, if you will, it has a number of header fields. Here's the data from the upper layers, and now these are all header fields added. This is part of the TCP header. These are all the TCP header fields added to account for and keep track of everything being sent. The next page or two here, I have a description of every header field, so use that for reference. But if we take a peek through, the first are ports. What port is sending. So if I'm sending a request from my computer to a web server, the source port would be coming from my browser. The destination port would be to that service on the server, HTTPS service on that server. Sequence number is numbering. Any bytes leaving my computer or leaving the server are going to get numbered, so we can account for them. Well, think of this almost like the odometer on your car. The odometer in your car always goes up, it never goes down. Well, the same thing happens on a computer or server. That byte counter, that sequence number, if you will, is constantly increasing as those bytes leave. So as long as I reference, hey, I started at byte number 1054, from there on out, we will 55, 56, 57, and we can start accounting for everything and identifying a missing byte. That's what your sequence number is for. The acknowledgement is, if I get a series of bytes from the server, I can acknowledge that saying, yes, I got byte 1063, I'm looking for about byte 1064, and let the server know I'm ready for the next batch. Header length lets you know how long the header is and where the data begins. These are flag fields that get used for setting up, maintaining, or closing out this session. Okay, so we have the synchronization, acknowledge, and finish fields, if you will. Okay. Sliding window, that lets us know how much data we can send per time, how many bytes we can send per time. And let's say I send 100 bytes at a time, then the receiver would know, okay, here's 100 bytes. Let me send the next, they'll acknowledge that and send the next 100 bytes, and then acknowledge that and send the next 100 bytes, if you will. That's what that allows us to do. Checksum is an error check, a basic error check on the data. If before I send, I do a quick calculation on this thing, put that number in there, the receiving end does the same thing, and if they come up with the same answer, if you will, the same number, then we know the data should not be corrupted. And then we finally have our data down here. And that's what we have here with all the header fields. Now, before data is actually sent, there's a three-way handshake that's done, and this is part of the synchronization. The requester, in this case maybe my laptop talking to the server, says, hey, I'd like to get your web page, so I send a synchronization to the server. If the server's there and ready to respond, it'll respond to my request saying, hey, dude, I'm here. I'm ready to do this the web page thing. I acknowledge your request, and by the way, I'm going to send you my synchronization. And we'll show you what those look like in a second. So then if that is good, I would respond with, okay, I'm ready to rock and roll. Let's get this web page thing moving. So this graphic in the book gives us an idea of how that would look. So again, let's say I'm the laptop here requesting the web server from this device over here. So I would send my synchronization, again, that would be my byte counter, if you will, the current byte counter on my laptop. So I would send that along. Let's just look at the last three numbers, 558, just to make it a little bit simpler. I would send that to the server with a synchronization, say, hey, I'd like to get your web page. So if the web server is here and ready to roll, it'll acknowledge that, and it acknowledges it with, here we have 558, it's going to acknowledge it with 559, meaning I got your 558, and I'm expecting from you, the next thing you send to me should be 559. That's what that means. It's called an expectational acknowledgement. And it goes, oh, by the way, here's my byte counter. What do we got? 669. 669. So it goes, oh, by the way, my byte counter is 669. So then when I get that, I'm like, okay, I'll acknowledge that. And I acknowledge with 670, because one more. 670 says, hey, the next thing from you should be 670. And I had sent 558 first. My byte counter now is 559. It has increased by one. It's the next byte that I sent. And now that we both understand that the byte counter, if you will, the sequence numbers, the byte counter, if you will, on each computer, we can now start referencing all of my bytes by a specific number. And if something goes missing, we can re-request that chunk of bytes saying, hey, can you resend these pieces? Well, that is going to get done before we exchange any data, and then we will exchange the web page that we're asking for. Here's a TCP header, and again, here's your TCP header fields. But let's see if we can try. Let's see if we can try to show a three-way handshake of me loading a web page. Now, I'm going to pause and try to reorient my screen and then open my browser and so forth. Bear with me one second. Okay, so we're back. Let me open up a new tab up here. I'm going to load a new web page. But before I do that, let me get Wireshark started in the back here. And we're going to open this guy up. There we go. And we're going to try to capture me loading a web page that I have not been to yet on this computer. So let's get our, I'm going to get my my wireless NIC selected, if you will. I'm going to start my Wireshark session, and I'm going to try to come over here and go to formula1.com. We'll try to load that web page. There we go. So there's the web page loaded. I'm going to go back to my Wireshark, and I'm going to stop my Wireshark capture. And what I want to try to find is that three-way handshake. So I'm going to try to I'm going to search for DNS, because DNS happens. Let's try DNS. DNS will happen before the three-way handshake of loading that web page. Now, let's see if I can. I was going to try to do DNS, and it was not playing nice. So we're going to try to go here, right straight to, I believe that is me loading the web page, but I was going to try to find the DNS to find the IP address of formula1.com. But let's try this real quick. Let's do ping www.formula1.com. It probably didn't need to DNS it. So it looks like we're getting a 2600 9000 2807. 2600 3000. Yeah, so it looks like that is, us communicating with the Formula 1 website. Okay, so if I go back here to the beginning, 2600, 9000, 2807, good deal. So if I go here and I go right-click follow TCP stream, I should be able to see the beginning of this up here of me talking to the web server, and then the web server talking to me, and then me talking to the web server, seeing that three-way handshake. Sync, acknowledge, acknowledge. That's what I should be able to see there. So if I now take a look at that, let me open the first TCP segment here. I'm going to look at the actual data inside. If I look at the source port, that would be coming from my browser. Destination port 443 HTTPS. That makes sense. 443 is HTTPS. Here's my sequence number. It's a relative sequence number, so basically 0 I'm starting with. It's expecting 1 as the next sequence number. Nothing to acknowledge yet because I haven't received anything. Here's your header length. Here's the flag fields. If I open the flags field, I'll see that the synchronization is set. And then my window size of 64, almost like 65,000 bytes. So now I've set my synchronization to the server. If I look at the one coming back from the server, source port 443 coming from the server back to my browser. There's my destination port. This just got flipped around. Its sequence number again is 0 because it's essentially starting at 0. Here it is for real. There's the actual real sequence number. And it acknowledges 1, meaning I acknowledge your 0 and here is 1, but here is the actual raw acknowledgement. There would be actually my byte counter. Is 2110 and now it's 2111. Here's the flags. The synchronization is set. The acknowledgement is set. So it acknowledges my synchronization and it's trying to synchronize with me. Here's its window size, a little bit larger. And then my third handshake is me acknowledging that server. Again, coming from my browser back to the server. Here's the sequence number 1, again, the real, 2111. And then the acknowledgement number of 1, but really it's 70, okay, from what they sent before. And then here's the acknowledgement set, the acknowledgement field set. So there would be my three-way handshake. Back to here real quick. There's my three-way handshake. And that is going to happen every time we try to load a web page or send a file or anything of that nature. Anytime that we need reliable data delivery.